Hi everybody, Dave from Mahala's Astrology here. There's been a number of people that have asked me over the last couple of months with the reports program, how accurate do you have to be with your time of birth in order for all the charts to be accurate? Or how close does the location on the report have to be for interpreting the data correctly? So in other words, the typical question is, I get somebody who might be born in a location outside of town, and they basically would give an address of the closest town, which could be 10 miles or 12 miles away. And they're wondering, is that accurate enough? Because when the astrology software, when you go calculate via the longitude and latitude, you could either adjust and put in the exact longitude and latitude, or you can type in the city name and it just resolves it for you, and voila, you get your report. And so what I want to do here is I want to show you what the degree of slop can be with regards to what time you're born, and get you thinking about it a little bit, saying that because some astrologers say that it's super important to get the exact minute. Others say, well, you get close enough. And from my point of view, it really is a get close enough. And so let's go take a look at Google Maps, and I'll show you some calculations here. So taking a look at Google Maps. So here I've got an image of Google Maps, and I've got it drawn here so that I chose a point here that's at 45 degrees north longitude. And if you look at the curvature of the Earth, it's much wider at the equator than it would be up here at longitude 45. And so this longitude 45 is a smaller circle. And the reason why I want to bring this up is because the Earth is going to spin from east to west. And so we get this rotation on the Earth. And what happens is the upper part of the Earth moves a lot less during the rotation than the equator. So the amount of distance that the surface of the Earth travels as the Earth rotates is different. And so I went to some calculations. Here I've got a little text file where if you Google it up, you'll find that the Earth's equator is 40,000 kilometers, or about 25,000 miles. I like to do things in miles. And then if you do some math to determine what the ring is for the longitude ring up here, you can clearly see that if you were to put a ring on there, it wouldn't fit. It'd have to stretch it to get down to the equator. So this is a much smaller radius ring. And when you do a little bit of the math, you find out that the square root of 2 is going to show what it is at 45 degrees. So it's a little trigonometry in there. But it comes to where that upper location is about 17,500 miles. Now, this degree north is also about how far you go south down into Argentina, or some 45 degrees south is almost at the bottom of South America, and pretty much it would cover all of Africa. So these locations of 45 north and 45 south, which would be basically either one of those lines coming from the bottom or coming from the top, gives you this 17,500 mile circumference. So now, taking that 17,500 miles, we want to break this up into how many miles are traveled per minute. So as the Earth is moving, how far does it travel in every minute? Well, 24 hours a day, 60 minutes an hour gives us 1,440 minutes in a day. And so the question is, how far does it rotate? If we're looking at 45 degrees north, we're going to get about 12 miles per minute. If we're looking at the equator, we're going to get about 17 miles per minute. So the equator is traveling a little bit faster. So now that we know that anything up here around 45 degrees north longitude is going to travel about 12 miles per minute, well, what does that really mean to you getting your astrology chart? Well, let's go zoom in on this. So let's zoom in. Let's pick out a random location, say Chicago. So looking at Chicago here, I've basically zoomed in on Google Earth here, and down in the very bottom, this little distance right here is 10 miles. And so from Chicago to Gary to Michigan City is probably about 20 miles east and west. And from Chicago to Naperville or Aurora is about 20 miles the other side. So, thinking about that, if you were born in Michigan City, and the Earth the Earth is spinning. So you're born on 1 minute in Michigan City. 2 minutes later, that time of the perfect tangent to the horizon is going to be at Chicago. 2 minutes later, it's going to be at Aurora. So you've got this 4-minute span where 4 times 12 is 48 miles. We're going to get this 48-mile stretch that we're going to be able to, we could say that this is a 5 mile, here's a 10 mile. The area of the screen represents about 60 miles, maybe 70 miles worth of space. That's 60 miles, it's 5 minutes worth of time. So now, when you think about this, how accurate do you have to be? Well, when you were born, what did it say on your birth certificate? Did it say, did it round it to 15 minutes? Did it say 4:15 a.m. or did it say 4:18 p.m.? So a lot of times if you can think about being in a delivery room, thinking about what happens during that time. I've seen a few deliveries. What pretty much happens is that you go through the process of delivering the baby, and then the doctor's busy, handles the stuff, and then he looks up at the clock and he calls the time. And the doctor may call the exact time, or he may correct it back a minute and say, okay, I've been doing this for a minute, or he may basically just guess. He may have been busy for a minute. So who knows how much he was off on that time. So then you think about, so if you were born in Chicago and you know exactly where you were in Chicago, and you know exactly what hospital it was, so you know the exact longitude and latitude. But if the doctor called it wrong by calling it off by 2 minutes, it pretty much meant that you could have been either born in Michigan City or you could be born in Aurora, because the doctor missed the time. He could have called it 2 minutes earlier, 2 minutes later. So when I look at the maps and you give me an address that's out in some rural area, you were born in a farmhouse 20 miles from the city, and the doctor didn't really know what time it was, well, you do your best guess on that. And you give that location, and it's okay to round to that nearest city if it's within that slop of a couple minutes. Also, when you think about this, how about vertically? When you think of it vertically, so you might be born down here in a rural area south of Chicago, or say if it were some rural location south of Chicago, but it's clearly, via the map here, you're clearly 60 miles south of Chicago, but there's no major city. Well, think about it east to west. If you're right about the same latitude as Chicago, well, you're on Chicago time. And so you can put in a Chicago address in order to run your reports. And then you think about it, well, that's not really where I was born. It was 60 miles south of there. Well, when you think about how astrology is done, nobody that I know of, I haven't seen any reports that use the exact declination, how high or low from the equator the planet is. They just use where on the horizon the sign is, so the east and west movement. So being able to approximate your location by something farther south or farther north is what some of you might have seen me do. And so I wanted to basically put this out there and try to keep it short. That's saying that basically when you look at your birth time, if they rounded it off to a 5-minute period of time, then that's a 60-mile east and west radius that the doctor kind of, didn't know anything about astrology and wasn't out to get it perfectly accurate. If it was on the exact minute, but you were outside the city, you can approximate things being close enough north and south or east and west within a minute or two. And you'll notice that it gets important when you're on the cusp. So if you're right between signs, and that minute will drop you into the next sign because you're at 29 degrees, 55 minutes, and you go a couple minutes the other side, all of a sudden you've gone over the board. But when you think about astrology, think about the signs. You think about how, since the signs are broken up into minutes, you can travel a long ways along the earth during that minute that would take you, with regards to getting over the cusp into the next sign. So anyway, not to ramble on here forever, I just wanted to present this information And if you like the reports that are coming through, we've got a bunch more reports coming out. I'm doing some research in the background to go with them. But I've put up weekly reports for everybody in the community, so take a look at that. I'm planning on doing that every single week. So every single weekend, take a look. You should get the next week's worth of transits. Anyway, I hope to hear from you later. Bye.